Baldur's Gate 3 is a vast game with hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of content and replayability. Trust me, I know. I've lost count of how many playthroughs I've completed so far, but I think the number is more than 15, and I've got well over 1,000 hours in this game. Safe to say, I know the perfect routes through the world and the quests and the dialogue trees like the back of my hand. So one day I woke up and thought to myself, what would a playthrough look like where you randomize absolutely every choice? If strategizing through dialogue options was no longer an option, it would force you to play in a completely different way. And honestly, after 1,000 hours of playing, I could use a bit of a change. Full disclosure, I tried a variation of this idea on stream a couple of years ago, but I had no clear set of rules to this challenge back then and I didn't make it very far, so I'm treating this playthrough as my first attempt at this. I hope that makes sense. So without further ado, welcome to Baldur's Gate 3 Randomised Challenge. The rules are as follows. Every dialogue choice has to be randomized, with the caveat that I am allowed to trade with traders, and sometimes in order to see what happens story-wise, I spin the number wheel without the corresponding number for the leave option to avoid having Tav not interact with anything, because trust me, it did happen a lot. I can ask companions to join only once, unless the game pushes them to speak to me more often than that. There will be no saves coming, there will be no saving mid-combat. If we die, we have to go back to the start. Inspiration can only be used for trap disarm and lockpicking, not re-rolling dialogue rolls, and we are using the honor rule set, and to amp up difficulty even more, we have the more difficult encounters mod enabled, along with the extra difficult enemies from the loot randomizer mod. Another layer of added challenge is that I try not to metagame as much as possible while also steering the character to the direction of story and choices. I think I'm able to strike a good balance here with this. I hope you guys think so too. It should be mentioned that I do also control my character's builds in this challenge and don't randomize those, otherwise I think I would have simply not been able to do this. That said, having the randomized loot mod makes this challenge a little bit more difficult because I have to make each build as we go and I'm not guaranteed any useful equipment. I use a ton of mods in this playthrough and the full list is included in the description. For transparency, I should mention that I have a double XP mod on, not only to progress a little bit faster, but also to balance out the difficulty I've set with all of these difficulty mods, because God knows I still died a lot. Anyway, with all of the rules and housekeeping out of the way, let's get into the video. Meet Tavni, our half wood elf ranger protagonist, who will be leaving all strategizing throughout this adventure up to the fates, and also whose dream woman is Barbie. Our journey begins when a mind flayer rudely inserts a tadpole into our eye, and soon we wake up on a nautiloid ship and quickly make our way through to us. Tavni chooses to mutilate the brain and we succeed, but the brain ignores our attempt to kill it and chooses to be our friend instead. How sweet. Tavni picks up her new friend and they make their way forward, meeting Lae'zel, who also joins us. We kill a couple of imps, loot a bunch of stuff, and journey on. In the next room, we find a woman trapped in a pod begging us to help her break out. We tell her we'll try our best, and fortunately for Shadowheart, a few seconds later we find a rune that fits right into the socket on the console. Unfortunately for Shadowheart, Tavni understands this, yet still chooses to cold-heartedly walk away from the situation. So we leave Shadowheart behind and move on with our quest to get off the ship. We fight some more enemies and in no time we are able to get to the transponder and crash land the ship. We gain back our consciousness on the beach and get to pick up a few pieces of loot as a reward for making it off the ship, along with getting to level 2. We find Shadowheart on the beach, who somehow isn't mad at us for leaving her on the nautiloid. To use her non-hostility to our advantage by recruiting her would be the obvious choice here, yet Tavni chooses to inform Shadowheart that she will be walking away, and walk away she does, companionless. We continue on and find Gale's hand in a sigil, from which Tavni chooses to walk away. At this point, I was realizing how difficult this challenge may turn out to be. Would I really have to run through the game solo in case I can't recruit anyone? I was despairing about this to my good friend later on in Act 1, and she kindly suggested that I randomize how many and which hirelings I can recruit and continue that way, so I do that, but that is way down the line. We then run into Astarion, who we actually recruit. Yay to not having to run through the whole game solo. Tavni initially told him to go to camp, but I took the executive decision to just picking him up into the party from there to not have to endure the whole game alone. Chances are anyway that we won't find many companions in this run. We then proceed to the tieflings who have captured Lae'zel. We successfully convince them to leave us to deal with Lae'zel, and they do so, and we are also lucky enough to recruit her. I genuinely felt so relieved at this point, with almost a full party of companions. So Tavni and her new friends voyage onward and end up in combat with some goblins and new allies. We take care of these enemies quickly and without too much trouble and get some more loot to choose as a reward. Then it is time to level up again, with Tavni becoming a Gloomstalker Ranger, Astarion an Assassin Rogue, and Lae'zel a Battlemaster Fighter. We venture into the grove, where we stand back when Aradin decides to punch Zevlor in the face, the latter telling us to go see Nettie for help in getting the tadpole out of our brains. As a token of our gratitude, we tell Zevlor that his people should have stayed in the Hells. Tavni is shaping out to be a really great lady. In the grove, we have a few pit stops to make. First, I normally run to Roland to convince him to stay to fight in the grove, which surprisingly we're able to do here. Next, we find Will and also manage to recruit him. This playthrough will be a breeze, I think to myself. I am, of course, wrong. But I feel optimistic and decide to multiclass Will into a wild magic sorcerer since I love chaos, and that is the theme of this playthrough. Shadowheart has found the grove too, and she stops us to speak to us again. She suggests that we both need a healer, and we offer finally to team up. Shadowheart says she'll join us, but only if we get rid of Lae'zel. But unfortunately for her, Tavni loves a froggy woman, so she turns her down. So once again, we do not recruit Shadowheart. Moving on, we find Alfira and tell her that making art isn't worthwhile in such uncertain times, and tell her survival is much more important than some stupid song. This one genuinely hurt my heart because while I don't always play a good character in this game, I always hate being mean to Alfira. She just wants to write her songs and lift people's spirits, man. The next night, Astarion tries to flirt with us, but we can see right through his wily ways and we tell him to back off. In the morning, we venture out again, this time to find 3 true souls out in the wilderness. They tell us Edwin, the guy bleeding out on the floor, has been attacked by an oil bear, and they ask us if we are a true soul, to which we say, "What's a true soul?" They're a little bit confused, but they do explain to us what a true soul is, and in return, we decide to gaslight them for a bit before revealing that we're not a true soul.
What?
What are you doing? Your sword, brother! Now!
They are not happy with this, but we quickly destroy them and then convince our companions that the new powers granted by the tadpole are too good to pass on, which I take as an invite for Tavni to consume as many tadpoles as possible later on when it becomes an option. We then run into Aradin, who decides to throw some slurs around, but if you think Tavni is going to care, you're utterly mistaken. She just leaves. And so do Aradin and co. Bye-bye, dude. I decide to have Will shapeshift into a drow to hopefully make it easier to walk through the blighted village, which luckily goes as planned. We then find Barkus tied to a windmill, and instead of talking our way through, Tavni decides to attack. But this fight isn't too bad, because as long as you keep attacking Fizurk, they will surrender.
Mercy, please!
Although, Tavni doesn't care and still chooses to kill Fizurk despite his cries of forfeit. Again, she's shaping out to be a lovely lady. After Fizurk, Tavni is still feeling rather murderous, so she decides to go kill the sleeping bugbear and some of the other goblins around the village. After that, we decide to run all the way through to the goblin camp as Drow Will for some extra XP, and we once again run into Shadowheart right outside. The mysterious artifact she carries shows us some visions, and she tries to convince us that we need her and that she needs us. To this, we decide to respond that we'll have the artifact, thank you very much, but we won't be needing her. She threatens us and Will says she can join us. However, Shadowheart reminds him that he needs to ask I forgot I wrote this. However, Shadowheart reminds him that he needs to ask Tavni first. So she hauls ass down there ASAP and tells Shadowheart she'll take the artifact, thank you very much, and for some reason Shadowheart isn't a fan. So we leave her there on the bridge and Drow Will makes his way through into the goblin camp, where he decides that out of all the dialogue options which would let him through easily, the one where he 1v6s these goblins is the most viable choice.
Right.
We level up the rest of the party, which means Withers is now at camp. We swiftly proceed to revive Will and welcome him back. We head back out to the goblin camp, and I decide to take a risk by talking to Crusher. This is something I rarely do, because picking the wrong choices here leads to a fight. So anyway, he demands we kiss his fungus-infested feet, but we tell him to kiss our feet instead. And then he gets mad, and we have to fight them. Nobody's surprised. However, what did surprise me is that the fight here works similarly to the one with Fizurk, where you can only target Crusher, and that fight ends faster. We actually don't choose anything crazy here for a change, and we resolve the situation with no casualties. We then choose to head into the goblin camp, where the enemies are aggroed and waiting for us. We quickly kill the first gobbos, swiftly loot, and move further into the camp. I was a bit sad that everyone here was permanently aggro, because I would have loved to see what could have gone down with randomizing every single conversation in here, but oh well. Before proceeding with the goblins, I decide to long rest though, and Tavni begins to feel the tadpole transformation take over. Lae'zel finds us sweating by the river, offering to kill us, and we decide to kill her back.
Vlakith Gorg Skatzai!
By Lae'zel, this is where I started to realize how many opportunities there are to kill your companions through dialogue and story events, and I started to feel a little bit nervous. After killing Lae'zel, Barbie comes into our dreams and tells us to embrace our potential. We're not sure what exactly that means, but we assume she's encouraging us to kill some more people, so we continue on. With Lae'zel gone, I decide it's worth a shot to see if Karlach might be recruitable in Tavni's eyes. It would be nice after all to journey into the depths of the goblin camp with a full party. Karlach tries to get to know us, and we act like a damn fool, and she calls us an arsehole.
Oh boy, an asshole!
We really deserve that one. I genuinely love Karlach so much, and she's my favorite character in this game, so this one hurt. I hate being mean to her. She offers up another opportunity to recruit her by asking us if we'd like to help her kill some paladins of Tyr, and we tell her to do it on her own. Are you fucking kidding me right now? Like, genuinely, are you kidding me?
Damn. After a decade in hell, I was hoping for a little company, especially some who look like you.
After hearing about these paladins of Tyr, we decided it's worth it to go check them out. This fight is so brutal, so I was holding out hope that maybe, just maybe, Tavni would not aggro them, but she did. So we just skedaddled out of there and pretended this never happened. Instead, this is where I realized I never actually went to save Arabella, so I decided to run down and do this. Now, this is one of those early game choices that had me so scared because I've never ever had the stomach to let her die here. Knowing that it was all up to fate and I couldn't even use inspiration to reroll here made me so scared. Tavni chooses the nature roll option, a stat which she has a -1 for, and somehow succeeds with flying colors. Arabella was saved. I was so incredibly relieved by this, it would have broken my heart to have her die. We then remember that Zevlor told us about Nettie the healer, and we find her in the next room. We tell her we have a tadpole in our head, and she offers to try and help. We follow her into the next room, where she asks us to hold out our arm. She pricks us with the mysterious thorn that she's holding, which turns out to be poisonous. She admits that she has tried to kill us to avoid us from turning into a mind flayer. Tavni tries to turn to go to leave, but the door is locked. The group is stuck waiting for death in Nettie's chambers. Tavni approaches her and rolls to attack. Honestly, it seems pretty fitting here. I'd be pissed if someone attempted to murder me and then locked me into a room. We swiftly kill Nettie and pick up a tadpole from her desk. Tavni chooses to absorb its powers, which is great for me because they are great. Before leaving, we sneak around and loot a bunch of Nettie's stuff, and we also steal Kaga's chest so we can figure out what this woman is up to. We find out that she's involved in some shady business down at the swamp, but decide to leave investigation for later. Instead, we decide to head back to the goblin camp, where surprisingly, not everyone is aggroed against me yet. We find Crusher on the bridge and try to push him off, instead pissing off Shadowheart, who we are first to kill. Bye, Shadowheart! I really don't have a great track record with companions in this run. This is where I also decide to respec Will slightly. I had a lot of trouble picking a build for him, so we'll see this a few times before I settle for something. We poison some goblins, and Will has the misfortune to get pulled into dialogue with them. The goblins urge him to down the poisoned beer, which he proceeds to do.
The poison burns your throat, but the goblins follow your lead.
They then set their sights on Astarion, accusing him of poisoning them all, and he fails at trying to convince them that he didn't do it. Unsurprisingly, combat ensues. This fight was fine overall, but having two guards was a bit scary, so I tried to keep my distance from them as much as possible. I managed to trap them into a bad spot and begin to pick them off one by one. They get a couple of hits in, but our party stays at a distance and keep hitting them with all their attacks, eventually killing them. After the fight outside, Tavni feels eepy, so we go back to camp, where Mizora ambushes us and punishes Will for not killing Karlach. Will, understandably, is shaken by his new appearance and asks us for support, to which we say no and call him a hideous freak of nature instead. Great. The next morning, as we venture out, a mysterious devil appears and drags us into hell without so much as a warning. He tells us he has a way to help us with our tadpole problem, but we don't buy it and tell him we'll have the last laugh, and he boots us out of hell. Afterwards, we continue on to Joaquin's Rest. We find Counselor Floric, Will's old acquaintance, who is trapped in the fire, and we save her. As a reward, we pick up this pretty good bow to give to Astarion. I then realize I made the same mistake I've made in genuinely the past dozen playthroughs I've started, which is forgetting about the ruins entirely. The reason I always forget about it is because Wither shows up at your camp when you reach level 4 anyway, and the fight in here is honestly pretty brutal at early levels, so I tend to just skip it and then do it way later for the XP. We successfully convince the guys at the ruins to leave. We venture down to the door and tell the muffled voiced man the truth, that his pal Gimblebach has abandoned him. He then threatens us, but we decide to venture in anyway. This guy and his friends don't scare us. We use a quasit to get a surprise round on the enemies and position a cloud of daggers by the door, into which Tavni chooses to run immediately. The cloud of daggers proves very useful though, with a few enemies ending themselves by running through it. After the fight, Tavni starts to feel a bit eepy again, so we decide to head back to camp once again. We suddenly jolt awake in the middle of the night with Astarion baring his fangs a few inches away from our neck. Tavni doesn't take to this very well and decides to stake Astarion in the heart. He doesn't take this very well, so he runs away and leaves the party and takes all of his stuff with him. This honestly made me more sad and annoyed because I could have used some of those items. It was time to accept that for now, it was just Tavni and Will against the world. I could not believe my luck of having rejected Shadowheart and Karlach, having killed Lae'zel, and now driven away Astarion too. Oh, and we of course walked away from Gale in the portal earlier as well. Downtrodden, we venture deeper into the crypt, where I didn't realize that trying to pick up these skeletons wakes them up and starts combat. I just wanted to pile them up somewhere and quickly kill them all with an AoE spell, but I guess the devs were one step ahead. While this outcome was annoying, this fight went fine. Although, in the middle of it, Will decided to use his wild magic to summon a hostile Mephit, which was less than ideal, but it's nothing we couldn't handle, and we completed exploring the crypt. After, Tavni thought of Kagha's letter, which mentioned the shady business going on down by the swamp. We began heading down there and saw two guys harassing Auntie Ethel, to which we said, "This is none of my business," and left.
Bollocks!
We continue on until our ranger senses start tingling. Something about this swamp isn't what it seems, and a successful nature roll once again reveals the real nature, no pun intended, of this swamp. We find the area where further clues to Kagha's dealings are supposed to be found, but before, we choose to rest. One must always be ready to face any threats, and one cannot do so without any spell slots. We hop on over and begin combat with mud mephits and wood woads. My favorite way to deal with this combat is by standing up on this rock and just wailing on the enemies. The mephits can sometimes reach you, but the wood woads won't, so there's no real threat once you're up there. I see an opportunity to get one of the wood woads standing in the water by shooting an ice arrow at them, and I critically miss. I swear this game just humbles you sometimes. Anyway, the wood woads can't really do anything here but cast these vines on the floor, so we just keep going back and forth, over and over and over again, each round chipping away at their HP a bit more. After the fight ends, we find a letter proving that Kagha's unsavory business is with the Shadow Druids. For some unknown reason, I thought the best idea here is to run to Zevlor to expose Kagha's secret, and when we speak to him, we roll the dialogue option to tell him we're kicking him and the tieflings out of the grove, which naturally leads to combat. I was genuinely so shook because I wasn't expecting this outcome in this moment at all. Things really looked bad for a moment when Tavni went down, but somehow Will and his imp pulled through. This was fine until the imp immediately went hostile due to the demon spirit aura, but we swiftly got through this situation. We then decided to finally return to finish the goblin camp. We dipped our bow in fire and started sniping enemies from a distance. This fight really didn't pose much of a threat, and we quickly annihilated Priestess Gut and her minions. We carry on and find this guy Liam trapped on a torture device. We calm him down by telling him we're here to help him, and then immediately say psych and leave him there. Carrying on, we decide to go free Volo because God knows I am addicted to stealing from him throughout the game, like it's genuinely my favorite thing, so we make our way there. However, I forget that there's a goblin in the room with him, so I try to get rid of her but don't quite succeed, which leads her to give me 4 options, out of which Tavni chooses the one that lands her in prison. I genuinely cannot believe the tomfoolery at this point, but I thank my lucky stars I'm a rogue so I can easily sneak out of there. But before I'm able to make my escape, one of the guards catches me and I fail my attempt to convince them that I'm supposed to be out, and they lock me right back in. I decide to take this time in my cell to level up. because what's better than to use some quiet and solitude to ponder my life choices? I try to make my escape once again, and this time I succeed. I decide to wait out my fugitive status so I can walk about the camp freely again, but forget that the whole camp is still aggro, so I end up in a 1v3 with these goblins anyway. I also realize Will is still in Volo's room, so I bring him out to help me since Tavni went down immediately. Will kills the rest of the goblins and once again revives us. We long rest and then return to try rescue Volo again. This time we fail to one-shot kill Krolla again, but luckily succeed in talking our way out of going to prison again. Right? Right? No, we end up in prison again. It's time to repeat all the tomfoolery all over again, so we sneak out of prison, and while we wait for the fugitive status to run out, we have Will wet Krolla, no, not like that you dirty pig, and kill her with some lightning to ensure she actually dies at last. He then frees Volo, and Tavni runs back to him now that she's no longer considered a fugitive. Then we return to prison to free Halsin, because I've heard you can recruit him to help you in beating the rest of the goblin camp, but I've actually never done this. But of course, this time when I really could have used Halsin's help, we roll instead for the option to tell him we don't want his help. Classic. At this point, I just want it to be done, so I decide for Ragslin, I'm gonna go full barrelmancy. This feels kinda illegal as it feels so cheaty, but I simply got so fed up after going to prison twice in the last 30 minutes and just wanted to destroy some enemies, so sue me. I had Will turn invisible and drop off the package of 6 smoke powder barrels over by Ragslin's feet, and then had Tavni shoot a fire arrow at said barrels. After this, we only had a couple of enemies to worry about. It's then time to finally beat Minthara, a fight that can actually be pretty tough because she has hold person and is generally really powerful. I decide to spare her here to give us a chance to hopefully recruit her later in Act 2. She tries to hold person us, but we luckily save the first time, with Will getting paralyzed on her second try. He saves and gets unfrozen, although on her next turn Minthara immediately lands another hold person on him. I decide to have Tavni try to get Minthara to as low health as possible in order to knock her out, and she succeeds. Will is hanging on by a thread at 1 HP, and we have only the scrying eye to worry about by the time everyone else has been taken care of. We return to Halsin to inform him that the camp has been cleared, and he tells us to return to the grove, which we do swiftly. The tieflings are grateful for our help and have decided to throw a party as thanks, so we finish our business in the grove and then head back to camp to celebrate. With only one companion in tow, I decide to speak to Will to see what might happen. To my surprise, we roll for all the flirtatious options, and Tavni and Will even share a kiss. Lae'zel's corpse doesn't seem to bring down the mood at this party either, which I guess is a good thing. Anyway, the next day I decide it's time to sneak into the Underdark, and we do just this. The Underdark is kinda scary and full of real dangers, like the Spectator and the Bulette, and whoever this is.
They are coming. You are coming.
Although I really should have known the real threat here was going to be Fate once again, as we decide to attack the Myconids. I've never ever done this before because I love the little mushroom guys, and I was genuinely really sad to see this happen. Oh well. We kill our way into the colony, then speak to Blurg. However, while we speak to him, another mushroom spots us and starts combat, and when we kill it, somehow all the spores around us explode and damage Blurg's stuff. He demands payment for his damaged belongings. I didn't damage anything, I don't know how that happened. What? To which we say, unsurprisingly, attack. I really didn't want to do this, and at this point I genuinely was wanting to end the damn playthrough here, but we pushed through. Blurg left mid-combat and disappeared forever, but at least we got to loot all of his stuff. After killing some more mushrooms, it was time to rest. Barbie came back to our dreams, and we demanded to know who she is, as if we don't know. That's Barbie. She once again tells us she's protecting us, but refuses to share any further info. We then find a gal called Tula, writhing in pain in the Myconid colony, and help her out by giving her an antitoxin. She tells us of her people who were snatched up while on an expedition, and we tell her she'll just have to save them herself. Instead of saving her people, we venture on and save Balin's dumbass from the Bibberbangs, and then proceed to go try fight our way through to the Susurbark. We kill one of the hook horrors, but Will summons a hostile Mephit again. We take care of it easily, but it's definitely a pain in the butt. We then sneak up to go snipe Filvro, who can be surprisingly difficult to fight due to his crowd control spells. We managed to get him, but the fight turns into a 2v6 with these hook horrors, which is not a great time, especially when you add yet another hostile method, summoned by Will, into the mix. Suffices to say, I turn Tavni invisible and start running away since there is no way I can get through this otherwise. I let the hook horrors annihilate Will so I can just revive him at camp, and they focus instead on the Bulette, who has joined the party now too, although they're not doing any damage to it. I decide to leave this fight for now, as it's clear that I desperately need to either level up or get better gear before attempting this again. I go and fight the ogres, the brains at the beach, and Kaga to earn some XP. I also decide to go explore the cellar underneath the apothecary, but once we get to the magic mirror, we choose to declare Saz Tam as the finest Zulkir who ever lived. Spoiler alert, that's the wrong choice. So we bounce and decide it's not worth it to try again. Instead, we go tell Dareth that we found Balin and we don't pry further as to the reason why she's down here in the Underdark. We then try to go fight the hook horrors again, but before even getting there, Will summons a Quasit, which in turn triggers him to also summon a hostile method. I can't make this up. As a side note, I think I need to make a wild magic playthrough sometime soon. Anyway, this time we're much more able to get the hook horror since we're better positioned, and we also grab the Susur bark. Later, I decide it's time to go investigate the Underdark further, and I venture out to the beach where I meet a bunch of people, and do I even need to say it at this point, we roll the option to attack them. I mean, this is just so surprising. The fight starts off pretty okay, but soon goes downhill so fast, which is when I realized I hadn't saved in ages, so I decide to reset the fight by fleeing, revive Will, and retry. The next attempt, I go for a surprise round first, then start picking off enemies while also crucially keeping my distance with both Tavni and Will. I end up putting a cloud of daggers right where most enemies are funneling through and just running away. That's honestly my favorite tactic. Just keep your distance, do damage, and run away. For the final enemy, Gek Cole, I ran out of patience with being blinded, so I just waited out at the top of the hill, and luckily for me, he just auto skips every turn, and since neither of us moves, I just skip through until I'm no longer blinded and can snipe him. After this, we find a boat and decide to take it into the waters. We run into some more Duergar, and I really expected this to turn into combat too, and honestly, this fight can get pretty tricky, so I wasn't too excited about it. But to my very, very happy surprise, we actually managed to get through it by succeeding the intimidation check. Yay us! We sail further into the darkness, eventually arriving at the Grimforge. However, before getting into any fights in here, I decide I'm clearly not strong enough since I've been getting my ass handed to me by the last few fights so badly. So I venture out to fight the hyenas for some XP and die. This is where I decide to just respec Will into a full wild magic sorcerer, since sorcerers are maybe my second favorite class overall. And then it is time to try fight the hyenas and gnolls again. This time, things go a lot better, and the gnolls end up being toast. Then I decide to try take on Flint and the rest of the gnolls by doing my usual thing where you hide right next to her, then unhide, and this should trigger a dialogue. But for some reason it doesn't happen here and we're just in regular combat. I try not to panic, but I low-key panic a bit. Again, I go for my usual strat, which is to keep my distance as much as possible. All the enemies start targeting Will, but a combo of water and lightning never let me down. By this point, Tavni also makes it up there and gets rid of another enemy. Will wets some more gnolls, no, not like that, and freezes them to death. Water plus cold/lightning is such an insane combo in this game. I genuinely can't get enough. Then we have only Flynn left, which isn't a problem for us at this point, and we clear her easily. After this, Rugen comes up to us and shares the passcode to their secret hideout, after which we thank him by trying and failing to read his thoughts. Rugen is not happy and attacks us, but him and his friend have got nothing on us and we clear them almost immediately. We also go into the cave and pick up the shipment and make our way to Joaquin's Rest to go deliver it on Rugen's behalf. Despite just learning the password, Tavni decides to attack the boy guarding the entrance instead. Just so absolutely classic Tavni, isn't it? I thought we were both going to die here, but somehow Tavni survived? I'm not sure exactly how, maybe due to high dex rolls, but anyway, it's crazy. After this, we venture into the caves, where Zarus stops us and asks us to declare our business. Instead, we say nothing and slip into the shadows instead, which causes the Zhentarim to switch on all of their traps. Unimpressed, we decide to just detonate the whole place. After this, Zarus runs away deeper into the cave, what a coward, and we follow her to find more Zhentarim in there, who we swiftly annihilate. I then decide it's finally time to go get the Spectator, who at this point I've tried to fight like 3 times already off camera. It pulls this absolute insane move on us.
Have you ever tried this
this one?
and we have to reset the fight. At this point, I'm so fed up with the spectator's shit that I go get all my smoke powder barrels and I position them so I can get his ass when he gets near them. I unfortunately get spotted, but I take a moment to position the barrels closer to the spectator and then run away, and kaboom. This was honestly probably overkill, but I don't even care. Thank God the spectator is gone. We then venture back into the Grimforge and end up finding Philomene guarding a big bomb. We tell her to go ahead and blow us all up, which she does. Will gets downed in the blast, but somehow Tavni once again survives. Urging Philomene to kill us all is yet another thing that I have never done in this game before, so let me take it off the list, I guess. After this, I decide it's time to go to the near fight, but I'm incredibly nervous about it, especially due to having only 2 characters. I've soloed this fight many times in the vanilla game, but having the extra enemies mod, the more difficult encounters mod, and all the difficulty enhancements from the loot mod make me nervous since I've had multiple TPKs here before with these mods installed. So this is where I end up rolling for a hireling. We end up initially rolling for the paladin Kurz, and we head on out. Back in the forge, we find Brithvar and Kur conspiring in the corner, and we try to read his thoughts but fail due to the -1 to intelligence. He threatens to kill us, but unfortunately for these two, we quickly gain the upper hand and win this fight. We're not so lucky in the actual near fight though, and we quickly lose to our enemies. This fight is genuinely so hard with these mods, I cannot stress that enough. So this is where my good friend, who I was live texting throughout this experience, suggested that I could roll for the max number of hirelings I can have at camp, and then roll for which ones I pick up. So I rolled for 3 hirelings total, 1 being Kurz, and the other 2 being Zenith Fircel, a cleric, and Brynna Brightsong, the bard. I've skipped through the long sequences here, where I played Sims with these hirelings and yossified them to hell and back. I then decided to roll for which hirelings I can take with me, and I rolled for Kurz and Zenith and left Brynna at camp. I honestly still haven't figured out a good system for swapping out hirelings, so I just roll with these guys for now. Anyway, it's back to the forge and time to attempt the fight again. I position my party a bit better this time and give them some elixirs. If there's ever a time to use them, it's now. I have Tavni trigger the explosions, but her arrow hits the scrying eye instead and it messes up the whole pre-fight dialogue and everything by just having everyone aggro instead. Kinda disappointing, but oh well. Will starts sniping his spells from above, and Kurz begins smiting enemies close to him. Will's mage hand makes sure to wet more enemies, no, not like that, and Tavni uses some ice arrows against enemies vulnerable to cold damage. Since Zenith has the lowest AC in the group, all the enemies target him and he gets down pretty fast. Oh yeah, and at some point here, Will also summons a hostile method again, which makes things just a bit annoying, but it's nothing we can't handle. Then I make a miscalculation by forgetting about one of the snipers at the balcony and get too close, which leads them to shooting an arrow of thunder at Tavni and landing us in the lava. It's almost like the other enemy in the rafters gets the exact same idea and shoots another arrow of thunder at Will, dropping him into the lava too. With Tavni and Will downed in the lava and Zenith fully dead, I didn't know if this attempt was gonna be successful or not, but I really didn't want to have to start over. I decided it was time to lock the fuck in. Kurz was my last and only hope. I swapped out his Bloodlust elixir to a Hill Giant elixir so I could try throw one of the enemies into the lava, but he of course slips on ice, and the enemies start absolutely wailing on him. Due to him being a half orc though, he comes back with 1 HP and throws yet another enemy into the lava. It's now a 1v1 between Kurz and this enemy in the rafters, and I can't figure out how to get there. So I just climb up and start throwing everything that I can at her, literal items, spells, anything, just to have this fight finally be over. With the last scroll of magic missile, we finally get her, and Kurz can revive the rest of the party. It isn't until here that I realize I never even freed Nier, so we rest and then head back to free him. This fight should be a lot simpler when it's just our party versus him anyway. Tavni throws water at Nier and then runs away. We don't want to get hit by that legendary attack this time, and Kurz's command Grovel somehow lands on him. This is great news, since this means that we can actually attack him without fear of retaliation. And Will does exactly this by upcasting a Witch Bolt that does 56 damage, aka half of Nier's HP. Zenith hits Nier with a glyph of warding, and Tavni finishes the fight by hitting him with a couple of lightning arrows. I'm really relieved that we managed to do this fight on our second try. If you needed any more reasons to hate this playthrough, we also convinced Skickbit to take the elevator up into the Shadow Curse lands and threaten to cut his tongue out if he doesn't do as we say. This party is such a lovely bunch. I'd maybe expect it from Tavni, the Ranger Rogue, but you'd think a folk hero, a paladin, and a cleric would make better choices. I'm clearly wrong. Oh, we also pick up the Sentient Amulet, which is evidently so much fun. Now, I go into the actual forge to fight Grim for the XP, but I should mention that due to the loot mod, I'm unable to find all of the molds needed to make some of my favorite items like the shield. So instead, I just make an adamantine scimitar. But first, we kill Grim by crushing him under the hammer, which we do with no problem, although the methods try to roast us, but we clear them too. After defeating Grim, I decide to go for a fight I normally skip, Anti-Ethel, just on the off chance that I might be able to pick up the hag's hair. I know it's a long shot, but I'm hopeful our girl Tavni is capable of making the right choices here, right? We kill the red caps before following Ethel into her lair. Absolutely love what she's done with the place. I cast See Invisibility on Will to hopefully reveal Ethel, which causes him to do fire damage on all of us. Typical. Instead of revealing Ethel, we just trigger the cutscene. I honestly almost never do this fight, so I mess up quite a bit here. But an easy way to distinguish the real Ethel from the copies is that her outfit is red and the copies are blue. We start absolutely wailing on Ethel, and things are looking fine despite the Bardic being at half HP. But since the aim here is to get Ethel to below 30 HP, I feel like it's doable. The copies then start hitting us with rays of sickness, and everyone is looking pretty bad. It's better than getting hold-personed, but still. I decide to just cast Darkness and have Tavni and Zenith hide in it. I finally get Ethel to below 30 HP, and then it's a waiting game until her turn. Will and Curse go down, and both Tavni and Zenith get hold-personed. Ethel tries to convince us to not kill her, but naturally we roll the option to threaten to kill her. Luckily, the game gives us a second chance, but once again, we vow to kill her. But being hold-personed means we lose this fight very quickly, so this was possibly the dumbest outcome. We load back into the beginning of the fight, and this time I position my party better, trying to avoid triggering the cutscene. We sneak around and succeed in triggering just the combat. I have the mage hand throw water on Ethel, and Will hits her with an upcast witch bolt twice, although the second one only does a pathetic 6 damage. At this point though, she is at a very low HP, so we let this play out. We get the cutscene where she tries to convince us to let her go, but once again we roll to vow to kill her. So no hag's hair, but at least this time we're in a better position to be able to kill her. At only 11 HP, it's not difficult to do this, with Will blasting her with the upcast witch bolt to deal the final blow. Mayrina is not happy with us, as it turns out that she had a deal with the hag. The hag had promised to bring back her husband from the dead and ask for her unborn child in return. We follow Mayrina outside where she's mourning by her husband's casket. Instead of choosing any of the other options, we decide to just leave her to mourn and walk away. With Ethel done, I decide it's finally time to journey into the mountain pass. We do just that and run into this woman, Lady Esther. She points us to the direction of the Githyanki creche, and then she tells us that she was going to try and acquire a Githyanki egg from the creche for scientific study, but failed, asking if we could help her instead. We say we have no interest in this, and instead try to pickpocket all of her money, a move she's not too impressed by and decides to start a fight. She has nothing on us, and we quickly take care of her. However, this leads Curse to break his oath. Oops. We keep on keeping on, and into the creche we go. Right outside, we see some Gith killing some cultists, and then we head on in, finding a bunch of drunk explosive kobolds in a room. We clear the room and pick up the ceremonial mace from one of the kobolds. Continuing on, we find a room with the ceremonial battle axe, and we pick it up, leading the Guardian of Faith to attack us, but this fight goes by swiftly. Finally, we climb up to the eagle's nest and roll to attack them. This fight doesn't pose any real threat, and we clear the eagles pretty easily before we pick up the ceremonial warhammer from their nest. We're now free to go to get the Morning Lord's Radiance blessing, which grants our weapon attacks an extra 1d4 radiant damage until the next long rest. After this, we head on inside the creche, but before, I have Tavni shapeshift into a Githyanki. I do this so that we could have a slightly easier time with the dialogue checks, but we of course fail and trigger combat. I mean, nothing surprising here. These guys are pretty brutal, and Zenith goes down first. Wool goes down too, but Kurz and Tavni take care of the remaining enemies. After this, we walk into the Gustiel's office and tell her we're infected with the tadpole. She tells us to go into the Zaythisk, but truthfully, we're a little bit unsure about getting into this torture device looking thing, so we tell her we'll come back later. She tells us she'll be back with further assistance and begins to run away. However, we know what this is code for, so we attack her before she's able to run away. After this, we run to the Kithrak's office, where she tells us she's looking for the very ancient relic we have in our back pocket. Naturally, we get a bit defensive and choose to just attack her right away. This fight goes fine, and we continue on to meet with the Inquisitor. The Inquisitor tells us to give the artifact to him, but we want to find out more about what it is. We keep stalling, and he clearly gets antsy at us.
So, the weapon. Please.
Eventually, we produce the artifact, and Vlaakith herself appears before us. Despite being shapeshifted as a Geth, we don't actually know who this is, so we decide to ask her.
Who am I? I am Vlaakith.
Who are you?
Who am I?
Who am I? Well, I am Theodore K. Mullins.
We tell her we didn't steal the artifact, and she tells us it is an astral prism and that it is corrupted. She orders us to go into the prism and destroy the source of the corruption. We proceed to go into the prism. We hear Barbie's voice beckoning us to come into chat between the two of us. She convinces us that she is on our side and has been protecting us, and then pulls out a sword. We tell Barbie we're not gonna kill her today. She warns us that Vlaakith, first and foremost a liar deceiving her people, will now come after us for sparing Barbie's life. We get a bit scared, so we say we should have killed Barbie. She doesn't care and sends us back out of the prism. We return to the Inquisitor, and he tells us Vlaakith told him that we failed at our mission. I get a little bit distracted picking our quest reward, and then tell the Inquisitor that we're just gonna skedaddle now. Bye. He doesn't like this and attacks us. The fight starts fine by us getting the Inquisitor to pretty low health, but Zenith goes down pretty quickly. We finish the Inquisitor, then focus on the rest of the minions. They're pretty brutal, but we manage to destroy them without the rest of the group ever being in any real danger. We continue on to find the blood of Lathander, but I send the rest of the party to camp. Tavni sneaks in, finds the legendary weapon, but chooses to leave it right where it is. Okay then. We go back to camp and level up the party to level 9 before venturing out into the Shadow-Cursed lands. This officially brings us to the end of Act 1. Full of morally questionable, bloodthirsty choices, our protagonist Tavni is journeying on with only one companion and of course a few hirelings. The Shadow-Cursed lands may look terrifying from whispering shadows to corrupted enemies and an unhinged, invulnerable man at the reins. However, for Tavni and co, the real threat here is chance. Our leading lady, along with her party and her deranged and bloody track record, are finally venturing into arguably the best act of Baldur's Gate 3, ready to spin a number wheel to make every dialogue choice. Our party continues out into the Shadow-Cursed lands and get approached by a goblin who warns us about the curse. She tells us to find a light source and to avoid going too far into the shadows. I have Zenith cast daylight on himself to illuminate everything surrounding our party, but Tavni wanders too far by accident and gets afflicted by the curse. This won't be the last time this happens, by the way, and it did my absolute head in during my playthrough of Act 2. We keep running deeper into the shadows and eventually come across a group of strangers. One of the goblins asks us if we're the ones that they're supposed to escort to a place called Moonrise Towers. We tell them this is correct, and the goblin tells us to speak to Kansif. We find Kansif and speak to him, and he asks us if we brought the liar, to which we inform him that this is a very stupid question and we don't answer stupid questions. He informs us that the liar is needed to summon somebody special who will be able to guide us through the Shadow-Cursed lands into Moonrise Towers. We inform him that we are in possession of said liar, and he is relieved. He asks us to pluck a tune to summon our very own personal Shadow-Cursed lands tour guide, a suggestion so heinous, Tavni has no choice but to attack the group. It seems Tavni has one consistent personality trait, and that is being a bloodthirsty bellend. So we end up getting into combat with these guys, with Tavni sniping 2 enemies in one turn, Curse smiting another on his turn, and Tavni dealing the killing blows to the final 2 enemies as well. After this, I decide to hold off on playing the liar and journey further into the Shadow Curse. We end up at Last Light Inn, a safe haven seemingly protected from the curse. We're approached by Jaheira, who stops us in our tracks by casting an entanglement spell on us. However, Mol, one of the tiefling kids, runs out and tells Jaheira that she can trust us since we saved everyone at the Grove. Jaheira is convinced by Mol's words and drops the spell. Tavni is now free. The game presents us with 4 dialogue options here, and I'll give you a couple of seconds to guess which one we roll for. Yep, of course. Unimpressed by Jaheira's initial distrust towards her, Tavni decides to say fuck Last Light In and attacks. This aggroes Jaheira, of course, along with a few of the Harpers who are standing close by. Tavni quickly snipes Jaheira while keeping her distance. This triggers more enemies to join in, including Marcus. However, Curse destroys him without any issue. The rest of the fight goes on without a hitch, although Will summons yet another method into the combat. After this, I decide to just leave Last Light be. Since we decided to fight everyone at the gate, it means everyone is aggro anyway, so there's no point. I guess this means that I won't be lifting the Shadow Curse for the first time literally ever. It is then time to rest, and Mizora decides to drop by to inform us that quote-unquote Zariel's asset has been captured and trapped in Moonrise Towers, and tells us we must go free this asset. Oh, and if we don't do as she says, Will gets turned into a lemure and sent to the Hells forever. The next day, I decide it's time to venture into Moonrise Towers, but what I don't know is that unless you already have the blessing from either the Pixie or Isabel, any light source that you have gets automatically snuffed out and you get afflicted by the Shadow Curse. I've never ever ventured out here without getting one of the blessings first, so I didn't even think of this. I I quickly run back out and decide to return to where we killed Kansif and his group to go summon our tour guide. On our way there, the party kept getting too separated and getting shadow cursed, which did my head in. I normally love this act, but my god, not having the blessing makes things so freaking annoying. Anyway, we play the liar and summon our creepy ass tour guide who runs up to us. He sees the massacre caused by us and he's like, "What happened to them?" And we're like, "IDK bro, we just found them like this." And he believes us. He then asks us if we're ready to start heading down to Moonrise Towers, to which we say yes. What follows is the most uncomfortable journey down to the towers, during which nobody says anything except for Karnis rambling to himself endlessly.
They should stick closer, my queen. They should stay in the light. Come back! They must stay in the light, Majesty. Return to the light. Do not stray.
Halfway through our journey, we're ambushed by some harpers. We lay down a wall of fire through which Karnis chooses to walk through and then yells at us to be more careful. I didn't think we'd be able to find an individual as unstable as Tavni, but somehow we have achieved this, which is incredible. Will then decides to turn himself into a sheep. As a side note, I've written "LOL, I love this game, it is so unserious" in my notes. We let Karnis take care of the last remaining harper and then carry on. Again, Karnis just kind of rambles to himself the entire time rather than giving us the sightseeing experience we thought we were signing up for.
But they won't stop us. They can't stop us! Do the fools want to die in the dark, Majesty? They leave us again.
Tavni decides that once this is all over, she will be giving him a 1-star review on TripAdvisor. We eventually make it to Moonrise Towers and Karnis scuttles away in the most creepy, disgusting way imaginable. We venture into the entrance hall where Minthara is being interrogated by Zrel and Ketheric Thorm. We decide to stay fully silent and just watch while they absolutely tear her a new one. They reveal to Minthara that she will be executed as well, and the game gives us a few choices as to how to react to this. Tavni rolls for the option to attack, and this is where even the game is like, whoa, maybe not, lol. We get to roll again, luckily, and this time we roll for the option of vouching for Minthara, asking them to spare her. As a side note, Minthara is probably my next favorite companion in the game, so standing up for her here made me really happy. The guards drag Minthara away into prison, and we get to see exactly why it would have been a disastrous choice to try attack Ketheric Thorm here. One of the goblins attacks him by throwing a battle axe in his face, and he reacts as if she just merely sneezed in his face. Zrel leaves us to deal with the remaining goblins, and we decide to murder them. We then run into the prison to go after Minthara, where she is being mentally tortured by some Moonrise Towers guards. We convince them that Minthara is our prisoner, and we have come to handle these matters ourselves, and they believe us. And then, naturally, we roll to attack them. It's actually incredible how drawn to the attack option Tavni is. We quickly clear these guards, and Minthara thanks us for saving her. We ask her what they were doing to her, and she explains that they were trying to break her mind. We respond saying, "Wow, that's awful, but now we must kill you ourselves." When this happened, I genuinely had to sit back for a second and take a deep breath out of sheer disappointment. Once again, this playthrough was forcing me to be terrible towards my favorite companions. And then, after pondering about the unfairness of life and the universe for a few moments, I proceeded to kill Minthara. Rest in peace. I then decided that the only way to atone for my sins was by freeing all of the other prisoners in Moonrise, so I proceeded to do just that. I first cleared all of the guards, then spoke to Wulbren. We throw his hammer to him, and we all run to the boat behind the cells. I then realize I can't tell them to go to Last Light Inn, which I normally do, because, well, I haven't exactly been to there myself, so instead I just tell them to get on with it and start rowing, which they all do. To where, that part is unknown to me, but they sail into the darkness and I get to feel better, at least for now, knowing that I spared at least a couple of allies in this playthrough. The next night, we stumble upon Will dancing on his own. We tell him he should keep practicing, an insult which he doesn't really seem to care about, because then he asks if he could have this dance. We say we're not interested, but then change our minds and say sure. We proceed to dance, Will doing his little routine first, and then Tavni absolutely nails her performance check and throws some ass.
How utterly charming!
Will suggests we should dance a more intimate dance, which we do, and then we inform him that this has all gone too far and that we are gonna go now. Will looks so sad when he walks away, and I feel like I've just beaten a puppy. Great. The next day we venture on to speak to Zrel, who informs us that she has a quest for us, courtesy of Ketheric Thorm himself. We must go find Balthazar on his behalf. We take on the quest, and she gives us a key to Balthazar's room, where we find a moon lantern. This moon lantern will come in very handy, as it allows us to traverse through the Shadow Curse without issue, as long as our party doesn't get too separated. We then wander into the Waning Moon, a decrepit pub next to Moonrise Towers. The pub is home to Thisabald Thorm, one of the Act 2 bosses you can also famously talk into destroying himself. We walk up to the counter, ready to roll for all the best dialogue options, and roll to attack. I seriously cannot make this up. So we end up having to do this boss fight. I'll be honest with you right now, I still don't fully understand how this fight works. A lot of the time, Thisabald is numb to most damage until he throws up or something, and the numbness goes away for a turn. Bro, I don't know. All I know is this fight is really a pain in the ass, and it goes awful with Zenith getting downed first, and the rest of the party being at half health. We keep our distance, hit him with whatever spells we can, and hope for the best. A Shadow Curse Zenith even enters the chat for a moment, which doesn't really complicate things that much, but it isn't very helpful either. Eventually, Curse gets Thisabald down to 10 HP, but he sets his sight on Tavni and Will, throwing up on them and downing them. Honestly, I'd probably immediately pass out if a monster like this regurgitated on me, so I get it. But Curse was now my last hope, and I really needed him to land this final blow. He missed his first attack, but luckily landed the second and killed Thisabald Thorm. The next day, we decided to head on to take care of Garengoth Thorm, another boss across the street from the Waning Moon. Unlike many other times, I actually remember to send all my gold to camp before entering combat here, which is great. 10 points for me. We speak to Garengoth to see if we might choose the right dialogue options to make her cease to exist without going into combat. She begs for money, and we toss her a coin, and she asks for more, to which we say enough is enough and roll to attack. Tavni quickly clears 2 of the Visages first turn, Curse follows and destroys another one on his turn, Tavni snipes at more Visages from the roof, and Garengoth doesn't do much apart from summoning some halberds and explosive coins, none of these ever posing any real threat to us. Finally, Tavni snipes her from the roof, and yet another Thorm boss has been defeated. We then head on out to the House of Healing, where the final Thorm boss awaits. He's in the middle of torturing this poor guy when we walk into the theater, and then asks to cure us from our suffering. We tell him that him and his quote-unquote sisters will just make us sicker, and then fail to convince him that they should practice surgery on him instead. They then set their sights on us, and a fight ensues. What I hadn't realized yet though was that during the cutscene, Tavni strayed a bit too far from Will, causing him to get shadow cursed. I genuinely could not wait to get out of here because this shadow curse nonsense was getting on my last damn nerve. But even with Will out of the game, this fight went fine. We get Malice down to 21 HP, but Curse misses 2 attacks, which is less than ideal. However, a guiding bolt next turn served up by Zenith seals the deal and Malice is defeated. Then, all that is left is a couple of his minions who we clear out with no problem. Afterwards, we speak to the innocent man being tortured, and fortunately, Tavni finds the kindness in her heart to free him and he runs away. We then run into Arabella outside of the House of Healing, who asks us to find her parents for her. We promise her we'll do it, and she wonders if she could stay with us at camp, to which we say no way, and Arabella runs away. Great. We then carry on towards the mausoleum, where we solve a little puzzle that opens up a hidden door. We then descend deeper into the mausoleum, into the Gauntlet of Shar. I should note here, since we don't have Shadowheart, I have zero intention to do the trials, although, admittedly, I rarely do them in a normal playthrough anyway. We run into some very hospitable skeletons,
Stupid worm-infested cockhead!
who tell us our presence has triggered the shadows, and we soon find out what this means. A few mysterious-looking portals appear on the floor and begin spitting out enemies at us. However, unlucky for them, we make quick work of them and continue on. Further into the gauntlet, we run into more of these very kind skeletons,
Rancid donkey scrotum!
and get into yet another combat, with more portals and more enemies appearing out of them. This fight goes down without a hitch, as we're able to keep up pretty well with destroying the portals, and our skeletal minions keep wailing on the appearing justiciars. After the fight, we enter Balthazar's chamber, where he tells us he needs us to clear a path for him to the relic, Nightsong. We convince him to give us extra resources to succeed in this task, and he gives us a bell to summon flesh. However, we tell him to keep his bell, as this isn't our problem to solve. Balthazar tells tells us we must obey him, and we try and fail to intimidate him. Unsurprisingly, the situation escalates to a combat. However, Balthazar is too weak against our party, and a couple of arrows, a divine smite, and a lightning bolt take him down. After that, we turn our focus on all of his minions, with another one of Will's lightning bolts taking care of an enemy. However, he gets paralyzed by one of the ghouls and subsequently downed. Curse kills the 2 ghouls, and Flesh runs towards Tavni but luckily misses. However, after a few hits from Curse and a couple of arrows from Tavni, Flesh goes down as well. After this, it is time to carry on to acquire the 1 umbral gem that we'll be needing. We head on into Yurgir's lair, where him and his Mergons are waiting to ambush us. We get to talking, and it's all a very long story, so let me make it short. We ask him some questions, he rants about his contract with Raphael, and we attack him. Some water, cold damage, and lightning damage is all it takes to destroy Yurgir, after which we go after all the Mergons. They're a bit tougher, but still nothing we can't handle. We then choose to kill some rats, lick a dead spider, kill some more rats, yes, all through dialogue options might I add. Tavni apparently fucking hates rats. We then go into ultimate stealth archer mode and snipe all of the guards in the library without getting spotted, then enter in to grab the Spear of Night. We then use the 1 umbral gem that we have to descend down deeper into the gauntlet and use a scroll of knock to open the door. We grab the fast travel point, but don't continue on just yet. Instead, I go grab some XP by killing the Kuatoas and the animated armor in the morgue. We also take care of the ravens on our way to He Who Was. He explains to us the dead woman on the floor, Madeline, betrayed her friends by ratting them out to dark justiciars, and he seeks to avenge her victims. He tells us to go find her ledger and bring it to him, but fortunately for him, we already have it. We give the ledger to him, and he performs a ritual where he uses his body to be a conduit for Madeline, who explains everything from her perspective. Madeline seems really regretful, and we tell her that despite her regrets, she's a complete monster for what she did. He Who Was is happy with our efforts, and we complete the quest. We then destroy the measles and the shadow mastiffs for some final XP, and then conclude that we've done everything that we can here. I feel a bit sad over not lifting the shadow curse, but what's done is done. I took Tavni's initial attack on last light as a sign that she was distrustful of the place, so I feel like pursuing the quest would have required a level of metagaming I think personally would have ruined the fun for me a bit. Anyhow, we descend into the pool of water in Shar's gauntlet and get spat out on the other side in the Shadowfell. We hop on down to the center to find the Night Song, who is the source of Ketheric's invulnerability. I was absolutely dreading this choice here because I've never had the heart to kill her here, and to my surprise, Tavni immediately chooses to free her. I could have cried tears of joy, honestly. She tells us to get ready because we're gonna go kill Ketheric, and then flies away. We immediately make our way to Moonrise Towers to go aid her in the quest to kill Ketheric Thorm. But first, we have to fight our way in with Zrel and other minions of Ketheric waiting for us. I start by sniping Zrel, and then have Zenith create water on Zrel and other enemies in the middle. Will then cast a couple of ice storms and deals the final blow to Zrel with magic missile. He also triggers a wild magic surge that makes all of us blurred, which is a great bonus. Tavni then one-shots all of the archers who are up in the rafters. The adepts keep casting Hunger of Hadar on us, but luckily it doesn't do much damage, and a magic missile from Will makes sure one of the clouds goes down as the enemy loses concentration. Tavni Misty steps into the rafters next and begins sniping enemies from there. The Harpers are zero help in this fight as they all keep slipping on ice. However, Tavni finally finishes the fight with an arrow at the one remaining gnoll, and we're free to move on. We enter the Ketheric fight, and I realize that Karnis is here too. I knew he can appear here, but since I've always killed him for the pixie blessing, I've never experienced this in my game. I start to panic a bit since this is a really hard fight on its own, and now we have another boss to worry about on top of Ketheric. Needless to say, this fight does not end well. For some reason, I decide to have Will trigger a wild magic check when Ketheric attacks him, which turns him, Karnis, Elin, Kurz, and Zenith into cats and dogs. He subsequently gets downed, with Tavni going down next. Ketheric also downs Zenith, and at this point I know I can't do this. Ketheric and Karnis start wailing on Kurz until he goes down too. I reload the game and decide to do some preparation this time. I have everyone cast Mirror Image and Blur on themselves, as I luckily have exactly the right amount of scrolls in my inventory. We restart the fight, this time much more prepared, and Tavni decides to focus first on Karnis. Something unexpected happens here, however, with Karnis getting blown off the rooftop. Although, this doesn't kill him, and instead he gets stuck in the lower levels of Moonrise. I'm not mad about it though, because at least this means he's out of the fight for now, and we can focus on just Ketheric. Zenith lands a confusion spell on Sistera, and by some grace of some higher power, Ketheric actually slips on our ice left behind by an Ice Storm spell. With Sistera and Ketheric effectively out of the picture, the fight becomes a lot less threatening. Will blasts Ketheric with a Chain Lightning and an upcast magic missile, which is enough to trigger him to leave the fight. A big tentacle grabs him and Elin, and they exit the fight. We still have a lot of Necromites, and Kar'niss of course to take care of. Each round of combat begins with a brief intermission of Kar'niss screaming at us several floors below, which had me cracking up this entire fight. This guy has some serious issues. Tavni deals the final blow against Sistera with a ranged attack, and Will blasts a Necromite with a Ray of Frost, which triggers us all to turn into cats again. Not ideal, but oh well. We destroy some of the last Necromites and move our focus onto Kar'niss. Then I realize that he is stuck and can't route his way back up to us. I have no idea what to do, so I begin to move the party back down through the door, which seems to fix his AI at least to the extent that he routes himself back to the door, but not through it. Realizing this, I send the party members through the door, which kind of, but not really resets the fight. We start absolutely wailing on Kar'niss, eventually successfully smiting his ass.
The hole yawns back at you, impossibly wide.
We then jump down into the gaping hole and find ourselves in some creepy, membraney mind flayer colony below Moonrise Towers. We find Mizora in one of the pods, revealing that the asset of Zariel we had to rescue is indeed her. Now, in case you don't know, if you mess up here, Will becomes a Lemure and gets sent to hell. I was so scared of getting this outcome here that I strip Will naked of all of his stuff, as in the event he was to get sent to the hells, I'd like to keep all of his things. We begin to roll our dialogue options, and we roll to examine the device on the left, which we fail, and then roll to activate the device on the right. This is actually the right choice, so I'm genuinely so flabbergasted and so happy that we managed to do this. Yay to keeping Will! We then come across this other Mind Flayer device that controls a bunch of the pods around us, some with people inside. Tavni swiftly chooses to purge everyone inside the pods, and we continue on through the colony to finally face Ketheric. We sneak into where he is hiding and begin our preparations. We place Tavni near the Mind Flayer to take it out first, and Will next to Elin so he can free her. We also have a couple of summons in tow, just to hopefully bait some of the enemies to attack them instead of us. Tavni shoots the first arrow at the Mind Flayer, which triggers combat. Zenith wets Ketheric, no, not like that, and blasts him with a cold glyph of warding, doing a decent 44 damage. None of us do much damage to Ketheric, apart from Zenith, who casts another glyph of warding on him, this time dealing 20 damage. Ketheric is still pretty close to going into phase 2 though, so I'm not too worried. On Tavni's turn, she gets one ranged attack in, and Ketheric is left with only 21 HP. A final Ray of Frost from Will does the job, and what started as a Ketheric fight turns into the Merkel fight. Kurz is near death, but blasts Merkel for 98 damage with a Chain Lightning, and Elin follows by doing, well, nothing. On Tavni's turn, she hides to get advantage on the next attack roll and hits him, and Merkel hits us back with a Gaze of the Dead, which fails to frighten us due to our elixir of heroism. We fly back to keep our distance, and we have Zenith wet Merkel, no, not like that, so that we can blast him for extra lightning damage on Will's turn. The little brain guys focus on our summons as planned, and then it is Will's turn. He hits Merkel for 76 damage with the Chain Lightning, which is slightly less than I was hoping for. However, using our sorcery points for a quickened spell allows us to cast another Chain Lightning, which does a whopping 104 damage and leaves Merkel at just under a third of his HP. Kurz does another 58 damage with the help of a lightning bolt, and then goes down as Merkel hits him with another Gaze of the Dead. On Tavni's turn, she flies back into position and hides. Shooting a lightning arrow doesn't do as much damage as we'd like, but we luckily survive yet another Gaze of the Dead and leave Merkel at 13 HP. A final glyph of warding from Zenith is enough to destroy Merkel, and he morphs back into Ketheric. Elin plays Dance Dance Revolution on his corpse, and after she's made a new high score, we're free to retrieve Ketheric's Netherstone from his person. All this leads to Barbie coming down to deliver a bunch of exposition about the Netherstones and magic to us, which we totally listened to, before leaving the dungeon through the portal. In the hall, we reunite Elin and Isabel, which is the one good thing to come out of this playthrough. However, we sadly tell them we don't want them to come to our camp, and we part ways. I've never done that before, so I don't know if we can actually find them in the city later, but I definitely hope so. Then, upon leaving, some of the gnomes aggro me and at first I was so confused as to why, but I think it's because they would have been at Last Light Inn and everyone who was there must have become permanently aggro against us. So we have no choice but to kill them, including Wulbren Bongle, which is just an added bonus to be honest. Bye bye stupid Wulbren. Then Barbie telepathically tells us that we must find allies once we get to Baldur's Gate, and we tell her we don't need allies. She tells us we really do need them, and I guess we'll see what happens once we get there. I anticipate Tavni will not be amassing a bunch of them based on her previous track record. Before leaving Act 2, we also fought these Githyanki, but my dumbass forgot to restart the recording, so here's the proof that we absolutely destroyed these Githyankis. And then it is time to progress onward, and unfortunately leave Halsin behind in the Shadow-Cursed lands. We're just outside of Baldur's Gate now and trying to fall asleep. Before drifting off, we dream about dominating the world, before our slumber gets interrupted by some very rude Githyanki barging into our campsite. We misty step into the portal that has opened and hear Barbie's voice yelling at us to come help her. We do just that and see a Mind Flayer fighting some Githyanki. The Mind Flayer is called the Emperor, and it tells us that it is our ally that has been protecting us this whole time. We're distrustful of Barbie now, since she lied to us like this, and try and fail to read its thoughts. Barbie, the Emperor, tells us to stop being stupid and join it in the fight against the Githyanki, to which we say no. This leads to a fight against the Githyanki and the Emperor, but we focus our attacks on the Githyanki first. Kurz throws some of them into the abyss and smacks the last one out of this plane of existence, and the Emperor thanks us for the help. We ask the Emperor to tell us everything, which he does. He's pretty shit at telling stories, as this one goes on and on, but then he offers us an opportunity to evolve further. We say we'd like that, but when he asks us to hold out our hand, we start to second guess ourselves. However, the Emperor tells us we cannot fight the urge to evolve and gives us the tadpole. We open our mind to it and begin evolving. This astral tadpole unlocks some really sick powers, but what I love the most is the ability to fly at will at all times. Anyway, having found out the truth about Barbie and having evolved some OP tadpole powers, we are free to rest and finally enter Baldur's Gate. This brings us to the end of Act 2 of this challenge. In the end, this was less brutal than I thought it would be. I'm pleasantly surprised that Tavni is venturing out with Will still in the party, and that she didn't elect to kill the Night Song. Of course, we lost Jaheira and left Halsin behind, but all in all, I think it could have gone way worse. After suffering through the darkness of Act 2, and the darkness of our choices determined by the Wheel of Fate, Tavni and co. are ready to conclude this story and venture out into Act 3. Without further ado, we arrive in Rivington, where we immediately run into a kid called Yenna, who tells us she's looking for her mom. We tell her her mom is probably dead, because why not? Act 3 is off to a great start clearly. We then circle behind a donation center, where we find this guard. We decide to speak to him, and he complains to us about refugees and the state of Baldur's Gate. We tell him we should just kill everyone, and he gets really into this suggestion. So much so that he starts snapping around and is revealed to be the one, the only bloodthirsty and shape-shifting Orin. Tavni isn't too shook by this though, and we continue on. We run into a guy called Arthur outside of his house, where he has just found out that a family of refugees is living in there. We tell him we can take care of them for free, and he is distrustful at first, but tells us to go for it if we think we can. This makes his, associate, Zenobia, suspicious of us, and she tries to extort some money out of us. We tell her she's free to deal with the refugees herself, and she isn't happy with that. We end up having to fight her and the companions, and the fight goes by swimmingly. We then tell Arthur that our fee has now gone up, and we want payment now for getting rid of the refugees who are living in his house. He says fine, and we walk up to the refugee and offer him a bit of money so they can find somewhere else to stay. This is one of the nicest things Tavni has done this entire playthrough actually. We then return to Arthur and collect our payment from him and get on our merry way. Down the road we run into a circus but choose to leave instead of even trying to get in, so no circus for us this playthrough. We then pick up the Father Lorgan quest and skedaddle into the caves beneath the monastery, where we kill a few doppelgangers and find the murder weapon with which Father Lorgan was killed. We head back up and tell Sister Yanis about our discovery, and she tells us to go find Valeria to go tell them about what we found. I then realize that I should change Tavni's eyes to reflect that she has become partially Illithid, and I think this looks sick as hell. It is then time to sneak into the city, but for some reason Kurz does not follow us and tries to walk past the guard, who he chooses to threaten to kill. This then turns into a combat, naturally, and I choose to turn Tavni and co. around to go help his dumbass. This fight goes on for what feels like forever, but we destroy the guard and are then free to carry on further into the city. We go into Sharess's caress, and before finding Valyria, we speak to the Drow twins who propose a night of debauchery together to Tavni. She says she's interested in the Lady Drow, but as soon as she names her price, Tavni's like, nah, and leaves. We then find Valyria, and Tavni chooses to tell them she's not found anything of use regarding the murder. So, onwards and upwards it is, and we venture out to find Raphael in one of the spare rooms in the establishment. Raphael then tells us that he plans to free Orpheus, who is trapped in the astral prison, but we tell him we're done listening to him and leave. One consistent thing about Tavni, apart from being a murderous creep, is that she refuses to listen to Raphael. Kinda based, if you ask me. We then remember that upon entering Sharess's caress, Mamselle Amira, the owner of the establishment, told us that one of her employees, Fionn, the stern librarian, had gone missing. We venture out and regrettably find Fion's body underneath her bed, along with a hit list left behind by whatever cultist killed her. We rush to tell Valyria, but once again Tavni chooses to not tell them anything. It seems for some reason Tavni is incredibly distrustful of this Hollyphant. We then run into single-handedly the hottest NPC in this game, Blaze Elin, on our way through to Worm's Rock. She tells us she can't let us in, and we try to convince her to let us in by saying that we'll donate to a fund for orphans. She obviously knows I don't part with my gold, ever, because she doesn't believe it. Tavni then decides to tell her that the real reason she's here is because someone has a plot to assassinate Duke Ravengard, which works, and voila, we're through. We march on into the castle and get stopped by a steel watcher. Gortash takes over the being of this watcher and invites us to join his inauguration, which is about to take place upstairs. We say, why not, and head on in. A steel watcher immediately informs us that aggressive behavior will not be tolerated here, and I was so incredibly worried that Tavni might roll to attack here. This fight is so brutal it would have been an instant TPK, but surprisingly, she didn't, for once. Gortash then proposes we form an alliance, whereby Tavni kills Orin and then returns her Netherstone to Gortash. We could then rule the world through the Netherstones together. Tavni has an inkling of curiosity towards this deal and tells him she'll think about it, but makes no promises. To no one's surprise, Tavni then rolls to tell Gortash he's a dead man and that we cannot let him take over the city. However, the game once again is forced to warn us that we shouldn't do this. We avoid fighting Gortash and watch his inauguration in peace. On our way out, Mizora tells us that Gortash has imprisoned Will's dad and that he's as good as dead. She says she'll wait for us at camp if we want to speak to her later. Once we land in the lower city, we make our way into the Flaming Fist's office. In there, we find a woman called Laura trying to get someone to help find her daughter, Vanra. The Flaming Fist are acting crazy, so we offer to help her. She tells us to go to the Blushing Mermaid to investigate, and we promise her we'll head there ASAP. However, we don't head there before breaking into the cellar of the Stormshore Tabernacle to steal some holy items. Doing this puts a curse on us called Castigated by Divinity, which means that when we heal, 2 hostile devas appear. We do this outside and pull a bunch of useless Flaming Fists into the fight. Instead of attacking the devas, they keep trying to fight the Steel Watcher that is allied to us for some reason, so yeah, they're useless. Will manages to kill one of the devas with 2 casts of Lightning Bolt and summons a fog cloud as a result. I have the party just go chill in the fog, while Curse joins the last couple of remaining fists in giving the remaining deva a deserved walloping. Tavni deals the killing blow, and we continue on. We head on into the Elfsong Tavern, where we find Devella. She tells us Duke Stelmane is dead and that she is investigating the murder. We tell her about the cultist hit list we found by Fion's body, and Devella tells us about Saravak Anchev, an infamous ballist. She says that ballist activity has increased, and we agree. She asks us to help her investigate the murders, and we respond saying we have better things to do than to investigate some cult. Nonetheless, she asks us to go warn some of the people in the city who appear on the list. We say fine and continue onward. The next night at camp, Mizora appears and presents Will with a choice. He can either promise his soul to Mizora and Zariel for the rest of eternity and save his father, or he can break his pact with the one caveat that his father would die. I think it's kinda insane that Tavni gets to choose here for Will, and there's no way to give him as a character the full autonomy to choose for himself, but that's another topic for another time. Tavni rolls the dice and convinces him to break the pact and earn his freedom. Then we head on to sleep, but the Emperor once again interrupts our slumber. We tell him his company is disgusting and that we don't care about what he's trying to tell us about his past relationship with Stelmane. He's like, "Okay, bye then," and we continue on with our sleep. The next day we go into the sewers and run into Yenna, of all people. She says Orin kidnapped her and took her down here, and we decide to ask her what exactly makes her think she'd be safer with us. Tavni is showing her kind side once again. However, this dialogue option reveals that Yenna is just Orin shapeshifted. We tell Orin that Yenna is all hers because she is an insufferable little child. Orin then tells us that we must go kill Gortash for her, or else she'll kill Yenna and us. Now, suddenly Tavni decides that she cares for Yenna and tells Orin to please not hurt her. Tavni's moral compass really swings from one extreme to the other in a matter of seconds. We then have enough of hanging out in the stinky sewers and go back to the elf song, where we find Lacrissa and Alfira are hanging out on the rooftop. Naturally, we roll the dickhead option and tell Lacrissa to get back to work, or we'll rat her out to her awful manager, who apparently does not believe in giving his employees breaks. Amazing. Add being a bourgeoisie bootlicker onto Tavni's ever-growing list of crimes. We then head on out to our first victim on our cultist hit list, Cora Highberry. We catch Dolor in the act, trying to poison Cora, and foil his plans, leading to combat. Unfortunately, the real Dolor escapes, and we are left to fight his doppelgangers. The doppelgangers manage to paralyze 3 of my party members, with Will being the last one standing. With one very upcasted magic missile, he is able to take all 3 enemies down, and we survive. We then continue on, and suddenly get pulled into combat by Damon. Again, this must be due to him aggroing us when we attacked last sight in, but I feel bad killing him, so instead I decide to just knock him out. Pretty sad, but oh well. We're then accosted by some flaming fist again, who tell us that Mizora told him exactly how Will killed his father, jealous of his power. We decide to navigate this situation by convincing them that we intend to save Ravengard's life, and fortunately succeed. They then tell us about the Heart of the Gate, a dragon living beneath the city. They tell us to go find it and ask for its help in fighting for the city. We hear them out and go our separate ways. Right next to us, we come across Aradin, the piece of crap from earlier in the game who tipped us about the Night Song. He tells us Loroaken, the wizard who sent him on this quest for Night Song, is the resident of the tower behind him. We tell him we found the Night Song and that we have no idea where she is by now.
Son of a bastard's hole.
He is obviously very pleased with this information. We then decide to head down to the guild hall. There I find Mol uninteractable, probably also due to what happened at last slide in, which is kinda sad. But we move on to Faerun, which is the real reason I'm down here. He carries something in his inventory called Terrazul that is pretty cheap to buy, which acts essentially as a way to get haste. I go over, buy what he has, and partial rest to refresh his inventory. However, the first time I do this, the Emperor yanks me out of my sleep and starts talking to me shirtless.
Brother, what's that?
He tries to convince us that we're allies, and we tell him he's not fooling us. He offers us to read his thoughts to gain our trust, but we tell him we don't need all that since we know his true nature. He gets mad and reveals to us the actual truth about his and Stelmane's relationship, namely that she was under his thrall the entire time they were associates. This dude then has the tentacles to ask us if we liked what we saw, and calls us a puppet. He also tells us Tavni has no value without him. He continues to threaten and berate us, and we respond to his ugly ass by saying we should have thrown him and the prism into the shadow curse. This makes him mad and he yeets us out of the prism. Good riddance. The next day, all I do is buy more Terrazul, then partial rest again. Only this time, I'm cornered by Mizora, who says she's picked up on the fact that Tavni hasn't gotten to do the Devil's Tango even once this entire playthrough, and promises us that she can provide us this, literally. Tavni feels the hellfire burning in her loins and doesn't turn down Mizora despite being coupled up with Will right now, and this being possibly the worst thing that she could do to him, like, ever. But hey, we all know at this point that Tavni is an awful, awful person. Indeed, as promised, when we go to rest, Mizora comes to us and we go along with the whole thing. The next morning, we tell Mizora that the experience was glorious and get caught by shirtless Will because I sent all of his stuff to camp because I was sure he'd leave the party after this. He tells us that out of all the people we could have bonged, we chose Mizora and implies that we should be ashamed. We tell him we just had a bit of fun and he shouldn't get so worked up about it, and the game fully glitches. Surprisingly though, Will only yells at us and then tells us to be more careful in the future. So all in all, we didn't sleep with him when we had the chance, but then chose to sleep with his literal mortal enemy instead, and he doesn't leave us? Oh man, Will's character arc is so poorly implemented I can't even begin to explain my thoughts on it. This could have been such a compelling moment between Tavni and him, and instead he just pulled the classic, I'm not mad, just disappointed move on us, and we continue on like normal. That is wild. We then briefly meet Nine Fingers Keen, although we choose to immediately leave before really speaking to her and instead go steal all her valuable stuff from the vault behind her office. Above ground again, we come across a note that informs us that Counselor Floric is to be executed within the next 5 days. We head on out back into Worm's Rock to go free her from prison, where we kill all the guards before speaking to her. She seems defeated and doesn't see a way out of neither the prison nor the situation itself. We successfully roll to tell her we're getting her out of the prison, and she says, "Okay, show me the way." To this, Tavni decides to respond by rejecting her and refusing to help. So after all this conversation and persuading, we end up leaving Floric behind in the jail awaiting her fate. Bye! We then find some anti-hag support group posters and follow the trail to Old Garlow's place, where we find a group of people. They see right through Tavni's exterior and speak the truest words to describe who she is as a person.
Wicked creature, return to the pit of evil from whence you came.
Tavni tells them we seek no trouble, but they do not believe us, instead staying convinced that we are some kind of hag creature. So obviously, Tavni's immediately over the situation and decides to aggravate them. Combat ensues, and Tavni shoots Jatlo first, revealing that he was really a redcap disguised as a dragonborn. This turns everyone else into my allies, and we continue to clear Jatlo out of the way in one turn. Adriel then tells us to go check on Mayrina, and we do just that. She tells us that after we saved her from Ethel, she put together a group of survivors who wished to fight against hags. She tells us they managed to track a hag into the city, and that it had snatched up a little girl, but that now their trail had gone cold. We tell her she's on her own this time, lovely, and then continue on. However, what she just told us about the girl sparked our memory of the woman asking for our help to find her daughter. Curious as to whether the girl the hag had snatched up is the same as the woman's daughter, we decide it's time to head to the Blushing Mermaid to get to the bottom of this mystery. We head on over there and meet Captain Grizzly, who tells us that she'd never even seen Laura's daughter, who supposedly went missing here. Grizzly also alleges that when they tried to kick Laura out, she pulled out a knife and became aggressive as well. She proposes to us that she will pay us a lot of money if we can... Laura. Tavni tells her we'll do it, and we head on out to Laura's house. She's of course excited to see us, thinking we'll have updates on her daughter. Unfortunately for her, we inform her that we're here to carry out our lucrative deal that we just made with Captain Grizzly, and we do just that. We loot a bunch of her stuff too before heading back out to meet Grizzly again. This is where we find out that Grizzly was just Auntie-Ethel in disguise this whole time. Ethel tells us Vandra is in her belly, brewing to become a hag, but that she needs time. She tells us if we walk away now, we'll have Ethel as an ally for the final fight. Tavni tells her it's time to die, and Ethel vanishes to go hide out in her lair. We follow her into the basement where she catches us. This fight is tough, as we need to first focus on destroying the mushrooms around since they regenerate Ethel's health. Tavni destroys one mushroom and gets the second one to very low HP. Ethel then casts Insect Plague on Tavni and Zenith, which is less than ideal, followed by creating all of her illusory copies. The copies then start to cast Rays of Sickness everywhere, and Zenith unfortunately goes down. Everyone except Kurz is looking really bad, and Tavni destroys the final mushroom left. Now we can focus on Ethel, who keeps creating more and more and more copies of herself. After a long time of all the hag's copies casting Ray of Sickness on top of another cloud of Insect Plague, it is time for Tavni to act again. She's at a measly 19 HP and does a bit of damage against Ethel and manages to break her concentration on one of the Insect Plagues. Kurz then uses a scroll of Ice Storm to reveal Ethel's whereabouts, as she'd gone invisible before starting to hit her with upcast smites. This leads Ethel to throw up Vandra, and they both end up dead. I know we could have saved Vandra here, but I low-key forgot because I thought my party was toast, so I kinda overdid it. RIP, I guess. But to be honest, Tavni has just murdered Vandra's mom too, so maybe it's better to spare her the pain of finding that out. We then hurry to tell Mayrina and the other survivors that we defeated Ethel and ask them for some coin in thanks, which they give us, and then we're on our merry way. But the question is, on our merry way to where exactly? Well, to the bank, of course. We gain access to the vaults by convincing the guy at the desk that we're a security expert and make our way through. On our way in, we make sure to steal anything and everything that isn't bolted down, and eventually we find ourselves watching as some bank employees get ambushed by Minsk, who climbs out of a mimic chest. Tavni decides to do nothing but continue to watch, and a false Shahira appears as well. We know it's not her since we decided to cold-heartedly murk her at the gates of Last Light Inn. RIP. Anyway, she zaps zaps her and Minsk out of the vaults, and we're left to fight their henchmen. We do just that, and the fight goes fine, although Glitterbeard dies in the combat. A few thousand coins and diamonds and paintings and other valuable objects richer, we then decide to go snork me before heading out to Lorokans the next day. I've never done this bit before without Isabel and Elin at camp, so I have no idea what to expect. We march into Loroakan's tower and reveal to him we let her go free. He appears disappointed and tells us to leave, so we do. That went over a lot easier than I thought it would, to be honest. I thought he'd want to kill us or something for doing that. To celebrate Loroakan going a lot easier than I anticipated, I decide to go ahead and participate in my favorite pastime in Baldur's Gate 3 and D&D in general, pickpocketing. I go to all my favorite traders and empty their pockets while they're none the wiser. It's truly a joy to me to do this, even though IRL, I've never even stolen as much as a chocolate bar. Go figure. After my stealing spree, I decide it's time to follow the trail to Minsk, and we find him in the sewers. Damn, the people in this city really aren't aware of the dangers of hantavirus, I guess, since they're so comfortable hanging out down here with the rats. We attack everyone, making sure to take out Roa before she runs away, since she's got 10k gold in her pocket that I want for myself. Sadly, I also don't care about saving Minsk, since we can't recruit him without Jaheira anyway. Boo crying over Minsk's body, though, is so incredibly heartbreaking, and I can't bear it, so I leave and go loot even more stuff that's lying around. The next day, we head out to the Facemaker's boutique, where we find Dolor has paralyzed Devella and Figaro and is about to murk the latter. Tavni tells him, back off, that's my kill, and we initiate combat. Dolor goes down first, and a couple of his henchmen follow, with none of them posing any real threat to us at any point. After saving him, we speak to Figaro, who is quite literally speechless in gratitude. On Dolor's body, we find a bag of hands and also a clue as to where to go next, Candlehollow's tombstones. Tavni sets out to look for it, but comes across some cultists who have tied Volo to a bunch of explosives instead. Yeah, sorry Volo. We set out to go look for Candlehallows again, but realize we may need some more Terrazul, so we pop back into the guild hall. However, we get stopped by some Zentarim at the door, who inform us that they're here to take over. We immediately enter combat, with the guild on our side, and the Zent are toast. As thanks for fighting on their side, Ninefingers Keen and the guild are officially allied with us. Hooray to us for gaining at least one ally thus far. We then finally come across Candlehallow's tombstones, where we go in and speak the code word Sicarius and enter through the door. We venture deeper into the dungeons and are greeted by 3 slightly strange guards with some weird names. They ask us what we can offer to enter, and Tavni offers herself, probably thinking of something else. But really, this just triggers combat. These aren't necessarily the easiest enemies to fight, but at this point our party is getting pretty powerful and we're able to take them out pretty fast. We head on in deeper into the dungeon and come face to face with Sarevok himself. We are presented with the opportunity to be judged by Baal and become one of the unholy assassins. A brief sidebar, during my first ever playthrough, I struggled a fair bit with the combat, and so I became unholy assassin here just so I didn't have to fight Sarevok and his minions and stuff. Truly insane behavior on my part. But anyway, back to the task at hand. We tell Sarevok we're ready to be judged, and he summons the spirits of those we have slain. A man appears before us, however, it isn't somebody that we killed. Nonetheless, we manage to deceive Sarevok that we murked him gleefully. Sarevok is pleased, and we follow him into the next room, where he tells us our final task is to slay Valyria in order to become an unholy assassin. Tavni says, "Sure thing," and goes pew pew and submerges herself into the pool of blood. This is so grossly unhygienic to me and grosses me out every time. But anyway, we have now officially become an unholy assassin. Good for us! Along with this new title comes a certain aura of courage and confidence, and we decide to saunter over to the Devil's Fee, where Helsik reveals that she can break people into the hells. She won't tell us more, however, which makes me mad, so I go over and pickpocket her baggie of stuff needed to open the portal to the hells. However, that's not enough, and I begin to try steal more stuff, and fail. This leads to a combat with Helsik and a bunch of hellish creatures, including some minotaurs cladded in gold. These minions bring the party to half health in no time, but they're not quite strong enough to kill us before we manage to kill them. With Helsik's bag of goodies in hand, we head on upstairs and open the portal and jump in. The hells part of the game is probably my favorite bit in the entire game, so I just could not skip it this time. As we land in the Hells, we're greeted by Hope herself. However, we tell her we have no time for her and continue on. However, this means that she doesn't give us the necessary disguises, and upon entering the house, we immediately run into a damned soul who realizes we're an imposter and raises the alarm. So we have to fight our entire way through. This is actually a pretty fun thing I've never experienced before, since I never choose to be a dick to Hope and always have the disguise on. After a while of fighting, Hope appears again and asks us to steal the Orphic hammer and come free her. We promise her we'll do it and carry on. We find the hammer along with some other goodies we decide to steal, and then realize we don't have a way to take the hammer. So we head back out to venture deeper into Raphael's house, where we find more hellish creatures that we must fight. We make our way to Raphael's boudoir, where we find a note with the passcode we need. We speak it to the pedestal that's holding the Orphic hammer, and the force field around it disappears. We grab it and fight our way through even more enemies before descending to Hope's prison. She's guarded by some imps and 2 spectators. We manage to quickly kill the spectators, which leaves us fighting the remaining few imps, and then we free Hope from her chains with the Orphic hammer and carry on. It is now time to go fight Raphael. This is my favorite boss fight in the entire game. I love everything about this fight. However, with the ancient Mega Pack boosts, this fight is insanely hard and none of my usual methods seem to work. Like, my level 16 paladin Curse only has a 36% chance to hit Raphael with advantage. In no time, 2 of my party members are dead, Will left with only a few dozen HP and Curse at half HP. I finally managed to hold Raphael and land a few big smites to get him to really low health. I think this is it until Will goes down and Raphael gets freed from Hold Monster. He heals a ton and his minions down Curse too. I realize I really need to strategize here and begin my second attempt. I have Tavni bait out an opportunity attack from Raphael so he can't beguile her, as she is my hardest hitter right now. She lands a couple of fiend arrows on Raphael before she gets beguiled again and then gets almost downed. I have Zenith cast Hold Monster on Raphael and then Sanctuary himself, so there's a lesser chance of him breaking his concentration. Tavni unfortunately gets downed and Raphael immediately breaks out of Hold Monster. So I have Will cast it instead before running away from the crowds. Hope banishes your gear on her turn and then goes invisible. Zenith then runs into the middle of the action and casts a couple of destructive waves, which do a nice bit of AoE damage. However, Raphael once again breaks out of Hold Monster, so Will has to start sneaking back in to be able to recast it. Curse unfortunately gets downed and Raphael is only at half health. Will and Zenith are my only hope here, and Will lands another Hold Monster on Raphael. I then have Hope use her Divine Intervention to revive our fallen companions before she goes back to being invisible. Tavni, having gotten up, is now free to go and absolutely wail on Raphael, which she does, and Raphael is finally on death's door. Curse and Zenith take care of some of the remaining cambions, and Will runs back in to reapply Hold Monster on Raphael. Tavni deals the killing blow, and we finally win the fight. We pick up this absolutely insane helmet for Zenith as a result of completing the quest. It's then time to say goodbye to Hope, and the best chapter of the game, and leave the Hells. The party is in need of some snork me time after that fight, and decide to recuperate. The next day, I make a bit of a oopsie daisy as we venture out into the Steel Watch Foundry without thinking of the fact that doing this before the Iron Throne makes it so that questline automatically gets completed too. In clear terms, this means Will's dad cannot be saved and he will die in the bottom of the ocean. Oops. Anyway, we find the Gondians in the Foundry being forced and coerced by horrific means by Bane cultists, aka Gortash's people, to build and maintain Steel Watchers. We speak to Xanar Tubin, who tells us the lives of the Gondians and their families are at stake, and we promise to help. For some reason though, the Gondians in the next room are hostile to me too, and I'm forced to just fight everyone in there. I don't really care though, because anyone who has ever played this fight knows that they're practically impossible to keep alive anyway, so I just do what I gotta do to get through. I did make a point to deactivate the motivators though, to give the Gondians elsewhere a chance to survive, but I'm not sure if this works. We carry on and find a few Steel Watchers and a Steel Watcher Titan in the next room. We focus first on getting rid of the normal Watchers before focusing our efforts on the big guy. With some lightning and cold damage, we end up taking it down in no time and head to the Neurocitor to destroy the Steel Watchers. We input the right code and the Foundry explodes. Outside we find Xanar Tubin, who is thankful for our help, but I think killing all the Gondians earlier meant the quest for freeing them isn't exactly complete. Oh well, to make ourselves feel better, we head on out to pickpocket some more stuff. since we just burned through so many scrolls. I mean, that's what I tell myself. After having enough of our thieving activities, we head on out to find the entrance to the Iron Throne because my dumbass hadn't realized yet that that quest is now void. We go in and just find a note left behind by the guy who's normally down here. And Will is like, "Oh no, my dad." And Tavni's like, "Yeah, I totally get it, it's so hard." As if the whole reason we're in this mess isn't because of her choices. We then decide to go back to Worm's Rock, where everyone is hostile because we just destroyed the Steel Watcher Foundry. We pick off all the little enemies down here and then head on into the prison and make our way to Answer. As if Tavni needed any more reason to hate the Emperor's guts, we find out that the Emperor and Answer used to be low-key in love until the Emperor started to turn Illithid and murked Answer when he tried to offer him a merciful death. I always think it would be so cool to try recruit Answer here as an ally instead of being forced to kill him, but oh well. We get Answer to his second phase in our first turn, and after he does his Mega Mech Blast 3000 move, one dragon arrow from Tavni is enough to finish him. Will then has something incredibly insightful to say about all this. After whatever that was, we realized we should probably head upstairs to go get Gortash's Netherstone. We sneak up there and pick off a bit more than half of Gortash's HP during our first turn. Will then haste Kurz and Tavni, and Kurz lands a few smites on Gortash. He then goes down, and we have his minions left to take care of, but they don't pose a real threat here, and we complete the fight in no time. It is then time to go pick up Gortash's Netherstone. Once we're out of the fortress, the Elder Brain makes sure we don't lose sight of what's next on our to-do list.
Kill Orin! Kill Orin! Kill Orin! Kill Orin!
Naturally, we begin to make our way down to Baal's temple, turning ourselves invisible so we can just run past the ambush encounter. Once there, we prep our party a bit and then go through into the temple to find Orin. We remind Orin of our pact. I killed Gortash, so she should let Yenna go. She turns her sights on us and tells us she's gonna kill us now, as she is Baal's chosen. We choose to attack her, and she takes her Slayer form. This fight is quite tricky if you're not a Dark Urge, as Orin gets a ton of unstoppable charges each turn, not to mention the Baal's Edict condition. I start off by using Kurz's very upcast magic missiles to get rid of Orin's unstoppables. She then gets real mad and starts absolutely wailing on Kurz, and Zenith unfortunately fails to hold Orin. She then gets a fresh stack of unstoppable charges. Kurz gets rid of these with another few magic missiles, and Tavni starts shooting monstrosity arrows at Orin. 3 of these are enough to kill her, after which we pick off the cultists. It is then time to pick up the final Netherstone, and when we do so, we get a vision of where to go next. A morphic pool beneath the city where the Elder Brain is being held. After a quick long rest, we decide it's time to head into the final segment of the game. We're leaving a fair few stones unturned in the city, but it just wouldn't really make sense to go fight Cazador or the House of Grief, since we don't have Astarion or Shadowheart in this run. Without further ado, the party hops onto the little rowboat and sets off towards the morphic pool. Suddenly, the Elder Brain appears before us, and it reveals to us that destroying the Chosen Three, taking their Netherstones, and bringing them here was all a part of its exact plan, the Grand Design. We roll a dirty 20 and thus fail to dominate the brain, and the Emperor shows up to save us. He whisks us back into the astral plane, and while we're chilling there, the brain becomes unbound and begins to take over the city. People all around start to turn into mind flayers, and those who don't become mind flayer food. In the astral prism, the Emperor tells us that we should turn into a mind flayer to be able to defeat the brain, and also demands that we give the Netherstones to him so he can assimilate Orpheus and defeat the brain. We tell him we will not become a mind flayer, not in a million years, and he demands that we give him the stones again. Unfortunately for him, we have the Orphic Hammer now, so we tell him, no chance, we're gonna free Orpheus ourselves. He's super unhappy with this and immediately ditches us to go join the brain's side. The Emperor genuinely fucking sucks. He is a controlling, manipulative freak with absolutely zero loyalty. God, I can't wait to kill him. After the idiot Emperor leaves, we break Orpheus free and convince him to become a mind flayer for the final fight. It is then time to leave the prism and enter the upper city, where we are greeted by dragons, nautiloids, fire, and destruction. We spot the brain and start running toward its direction. We enter this hall where a flaming fist is giving an impassioned speech to a completely empty room. Well, apart from Withers, Nose and Nine Fingers Keen, who happens to be the only ally we made in this entire game. Tavni shouts out some words of encouragement to this empty room, and we cheer and then head on out. We turn invisible and run through the courtyard, soon arriving at the brainstem, which will allow us to enter the final fight. We climb up to the top of the nether brain and are greeted by tons of enemies, including the Emperor. This is genuinely maybe the hardest fight in the game for me, which I know probably sounds crazy, but I find that so many of these enemies have such powerful AoE and crowd control abilities that something always just goes wrong. But this time, things go a little better, and Tavni manages to murk the Emperor during her first turn, and I also popped the achievement for killing the dragon too. I honestly had never even bothered to attempt that before this. But anyway, after that, the biggest threat to us is the mind flayers next to the crown, so we focus on taking them down as fast as possible. After all that is done, Zenith flies up, casting a globe of invulnerability around the party along with Sanctuary on himself for a better chance at keeping his concentration on the globe. Orpheus begins channeling the portal, and we pick off the last Dream Guardian. The portal finally opens and we enter into the arena with the Nether Brain. Zenith flies closer to the brain and opens the heavenly floodgates upon it to make it wet. No, not like that, and casts a couple of chain lightnings on it, taking its HP down to 285. Curse then smites it, taking its HP down even more to 119. Then, Orpheus flies closer and blasts the brain with a massive 108 damage from a chain lightning, leaving it with only 11 HP. All in all, doing about 450 damage in our first turn to the brain with only 3 characters is not bad, and at the beginning of the next round, Tavni jumps into the arena and deals the killing blow with a regular old arrow. The brain implodes, and it's time for Tavni to make some final choices. In this moment, she chooses to betray Orpheus, dominate the brain, and to become the Absolute. And this is what happened.
You have come so far. Once you wished for nothing more than to survive. But now your dreams are far grander. By your hand alone, the future of all things shall be determined. Or so it would have been, had you not indulged too often in the power that the Illithids provided. Now the scales demand to be balanced. Ceramorphosis beckons. This is but the first conquest. Every realm shall quake at your power. Every tongue shall speak your name in awe. Every god shall perish in your shadow. This world is yours. Now for the rest.
And this, everybody, concludes our playthrough. Tavni, having made almost all the terrible choices throughout the playthrough, apart from a few odd ones here and there, decided to take over the world, become the absolute, and create a world of terror. Turning into a mind flayer at the end was the price she paid, even after having resisted it multiple times, and I guess that serves her right. I want to thank you all for watching this playthrough. I had so much fun playing it, and even more fun sharing it with you all. I feel like this ending was super consistent with the luck that we had throughout this, with rolling and the dialogues. And in the end, we got a very reliable idea of who Tavni really is. Thank you again so much for coming along on this randomized Baldur's Gate 3 journey with me, and I hope to see you in the next video. I hope you have a lovely day. Bye!
In my name.